Hi, I'm Bryce Baker, a Master Mason from Meridian Lodge number 47 in Meridian, Idaho.
And I'm Wayne Ross, also from Meridian 47, and we are both 32nd degree Scottish Rite Masons here in Boise, Idaho.
We wanted to take a minute to introduce our podcast, Templar on the Run. It's a platform for inquiry into Freemasonry, and really just to kind of peel back the veil on all things Masonic to anyone interested.
At Templar on the Run, it's our goal really just to seek out the commonalities between Freemasonry and all the local nonprofit groups, faith-based organizations, and basically anybody else who has a group and organization where they are focused on things sort of like we do within the craft.
So if you're interested, or if this sounds interesting to you, please go back to Templar on the Run on Spotify or Google Podcasts and give us a listen. We're going to be releasing our 13th episode following this video, and it will be our first video on YouTube.
We appreciate all your guys' support thus far for the 12 episodes that have been on Spotify and Google Podcasts, and can't wait for some of the content that we have upcoming with some of the local churches as well as some of our other fraternal organizations.
Yeah, things we've done in the past are we've had a Buddhist monk on, a pair of Prince Hall Masons, and many more. So again, if anything sounds interesting, please give us a listen. It's Templar on the Run on Spotify and Google Podcasts. You can find us on Twitter and Reddit at Templar on the Run. You can find us on Instagram at Temp on the Run, on TikTok at Templar on the Run. And if you have any questions, feel free to email us at templarontheRun@gmail.com. Templar on the Run, that's all you gotta remember, really.
All you gotta remember, put it in. Please send us some feedback, and we'd love to hear from it and include it in future shows.
All right, thanks everyone. Have a great rest of your day. All right, everyone, welcome to Templar on the Run, episode 13. We're kind of doing like a special tribute to our armed forces kind of deal this episode. We've got several brothers from our lodge here, and of course, Brother Bryce Baker here with
Brother Wayne Ross from Meridian 47, down at Unbound once again, checking out the facility this time, and we've got a little device back over there so all the brothers can wave and see themselves there. So we're just trying to use all this cool free stuff here. If you haven't found out about Unbound, check it out. Meridian Unbound, it's a great place for makers.
Yeah, definitely. Do we want to go around the room here and just kind of introduce yourself here?
Sure. Brother Dom Spadaro, Meridian 47.
And also what service were you in?
I was in the Army for 10 years, 1997 to 2007.
Hey, I'm Brother Nick Keels, Meridian 47. I currently serve in the Idaho Army National Guard. Enlisted in 2010, commissioned in 2020, and still going.
I'm Brother Mark Smith. I served in the Air Force for 25 years, just retired in 2009.
All right, well, welcome everyone to the podcast. Great to have you guys. Where do you want to start, Brother Wayne?
I think one of the easiest places to start, sort of just bouncing off of what our Prince Hall brothers spoke with us about a couple episodes back. If you haven't had a chance to listen yet, they were talking about their experiences. One in particular, Brother Therian, he was raised in Masonry in Japan, over on a base, and in a little, he called it a little closet pretty much, that they had to work with to get that taken care of. And and we were just talking to them about some of those almost stereotypes, like people think that you have to be in the service to be in Prince Hall, from the outside kind of a thing. And sort of in that same vein, there are times in our country where there's a lot of service that leads to those members joining Masonry. So the question is sort of just open in that realm. Did you know about Masonry before? Was it a connection you made with others active on base like they were talking about? How did this world sort of connect with your old world?
Yeah, so for me, it's a really odd connection. In high school, one of my favorite football coaches, Dick Best, he used to wear a ring, a Masonic ring, and I didn't know anything about it at the time. And when I got into and decided to go to West Point, he pulled me off to the side. And at the time, he was a major in the Marine Corps, but he got his first commission in the Army. Then he got out, went in the Marine Corps, and commissioned in the Marine Corps. And he told me, if you ever have an opportunity to become a Mason, do it. And the other thing about that too is he gave me his commission bars when he became a first lieutenant in the Army. He gave me his original bars so that when I got commissioned, those were the bars that went on my uniform. So just that, there's a really neat connection there to Masonry, going all the way back before I even decided to go into the military.
Mm-hmm. That's pretty cool.
So for myself, I didn't really know of any correlation between service members and Masons until I had went through the degrees. I was raised I was a fellow craft right before I left for Fort Gordon after I commissioned. I was there for about 4 months, and that's when I actually started noticing a huge correlation between service members and the fraternity, right? Even when I first joined Meridian 47, I noticed a couple of guys in the lodge were prior service or currently serving in some shape, way, or form. So the longer I've been in the fraternity, the more I've been able to see a correlation between service members joining the fraternity, or not really a correlation, but I've seen more people, or I've acknowledged more people that have done that.
My association with Masonry predates my association with the military by quite a bit. I grew up as a Mason. I grew up in Meridian 47.
Mm-hmm.
I was in diapers when the building was built. My dad was master of the lodge when they took out the loan to build it. So I've been with Meridian Masonry for virtually my entire life. My dad actually got interested in Masonry in the Army during World War II. A really good friend of his was a Mason, and then after the war, when he separated and he started dating my mom, my mom's grandfather was a member of 47 from the 1930s, and so Dad joined the lodge and grew up into it, and so I became a Mason in 1972. I was raised in 1973, but I was the first 18-year-old, 19 by the time I was raised, but to be raised in Meridian Lodge. It was when they changed the age of majority from 21 to 18, so you could enter a contract. You were no longer in your non-age. You were a full man. So I joined as soon as I could, and then I was really pretty busy with college and everything, and I'll skip a lot of that. move on to the military part. So I got a degree in chemical engineering at Lehigh University in Pennsylvania in 1984, and the bottom kind of fell out of the job market for engineers at that year, and there was a recruiter on base talking about some medical opportunities, and so I jumped at that. He was offering me a job for 3 years, and I'd never done that before, so I jumped to that and joined the Air Force, and been with the Air Force ever, turned into a career, 25 years.
Nice.
Yeah. So you got 25 years in the Air Force, 50 years in Masonry. You're just all around. That's
right.
awesome.
That's right.
And then 2 degrees too, right? I think.
Well, 2 PhDs.
Or 2 PhDs. My bad.
7 degrees altogether.
Y'all got something to work for here.
Slacking.
It's what I do.
Looking at you, Nick. You're the youngest.
So kind of playing off that, then, what do you guys see in the correlation, not only between military and Freemasonry, but Freemasonry and just education, and not just education like going to school, but just kind of educating yourself in all the different things that Masonry kind of tells you to educate yourself in, right? Like the 7 arts and sciences. What kind of connections do you see there? Have you guys done anything? I know we know Brother Mark has.
Yeah, because remember, a lot of what we are trying to do is to make people understand that, all takers kind of a thing, come into Masonry. We're all got the different backgrounds, and we all do different things, and just trying to sort of demystify that it's only this kind of person, it's only this kind of a thing. So.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I love about it, is you get to, just like the military, you get to deal with and work with and be brothers with people from all walks of life. I love that about the military, because I grew up in Southern California, and then you get to meet people from the South, from the North, from all over the country, and learn about them, learn about the culture, and I think that's an important piece of being a Mason too, is being able to talk to anybody and learn from anybody, and
Travel in foreign countries.
Yeah, travel in foreign countries, exactly. So
yeah, I think something that I've realized in my short time in Masonry is that you make what you put into Freemasonry is what you get out of it, right? And so, like, you get 100%. Just show up to lodge, go through the motions. You can do nothing between stated meetings, go to fellowship sometimes, but you have to really put in an effort to have motivation and discipline to study and learn the craft, right? Something that I've tried to recently do is actually understand the craft, study more about it, read books, so I can have a better understanding of messages, the history, and everything else that goes along with whenever we're going through a stated meeting or whenever we're going through the degrees with somebody else, right? So there's plenty of opportunities for brothers in the lodge to learn from, but I think at the same time you have to put effort in on your side to learn and grow and get what you want out of Freemasonry. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a great correlation. And one of the things that attracted me to the Air Force was this opportunity to maybe go for a PhD at some time, and it actually turned out. But more than that, and touching on what you said about having to put into it to get out of it, I made rank. And one of the reasons I made rank is because I passed all those courses, those required courses.
Mm-hmm.
My kids would find me studying at night, and this was not when I was in graduate school. I was studying for squadron officer school. I was studying for Air Command and Staff College. I was studying for Air War College. I studied and studied and studied and made those milestones, and that not in and of itself took me to eventually 06, but I wouldn't have made 06 if I hadn't done that. And the same thing goes with the craft. You can, some guys it's just dinner and a show. It's a pastime. But the ones who really study what Masonry is and what it does for you, they develop those leadership skills. Now, you don't get it directly out of those courses in the Air Force either. You have to also put them into practice. And you get those skills in Masonry and put them into practice, and it makes a difference in your life.
Yeah, it would seem like, because I hadn't thought about that really until Nick started saying it, because I never thought about it from a military perspective. Never served myself, but it would seem like that, yeah, there's probably, and you all probably know plenty of guys who in the military just sat on their hands, served their time and move forward, and then so they probably wouldn't take on this next step like this. So maybe there's a correlation there between that of the amount of effort that we would put in just in our daily lives and our occupations, but in that military service, and then you come out and what's the next thing? What's the next piece that I can get involved in and expand my knowledge base and continue on with those things. We know with the amount of years Brother Mark's been in, he's got that going, and then Dom over here is always sending me all just kinds of stuff that he finds as he's
I'm always searching, always looking,
as he's scouring various sources to find that kind of stuff. And I think that would be like more of an internal drive, especially, and that's coming through I think in a lot of our episodes too, that internal drive to want to do this thing, do it well.
I mean, it's funny that you say that, because there was this, I don't know if it's still this way, Nick, but there was a lot of times that you would hear, don't volunteer for anything.
Yeah, 100%.
Right?
Yeah.
Don't volunteer for
100%.
anything. And there are some people that live their lives that way.
Mm-hmm.
And there are other people that say, you know what if I'm missing an opportunity there to learn something or to do something different? And I got so many opportunities from volunteering for things in the military.
Right.
So, and it's the same way in Masonry. There's lots of opportunities to do work in the lodge, and lots of opportunities to do things for our brothers, and we can either step up or just sit quietly and sit on our hands.
I think too, I read a book recently, and a quote from that book, and I'm going to paraphrase this because I'm going to butcher it, but it basically was saying that your willingness to improve, or your willingness to do hard things, will dictate your success, right? So your willingness to do those hard things. Like I got assigned to do a really difficult task to come back home, right? That was rough, but I learned so much from that. Putting my head down and learning stuff about the craft, I'm learning so much from that, right? There's so many benefits and opportunities from that, even though it doesn't seem sexy all the time. And it's you're up late nights and you're stressing, your hairline's receding. There's definitely benefit in putting your head down, putting your shoulders to the wheel, and doing work and learning from it and reaping the benefits from that.
So one thing we kind of touched on a little bit, we mentioned traveling in foreign countries. You know, why don't you guys tell us a little bit what that was like? I know you guys probably weren't, well, you were just over, right? You didn't, we kind of spoke before, you didn't come across any military lodges really that you could join.
I mean, yeah, so I ran into, like I said, the more I've spent in the military, the more I've been in the fraternity, I've ran into a lot of brethren across wherever, right? Like, I wear a ring, it's some security guard on Camp Arif John, he's in the fraternity, right? Or I ran into a guy over by my shop in Kuwait, and he was wearing a ring that had the square and compass on it, right? So, and those are talking points that you can connect with somebody on. We met as a group. We actually started this WhatsApp chat for us all to meet. We met at the USO at one point. I never really officially traveled to a lodge. I understood, or at least I had heard, that there was some Prince Hall lodges in that general vicinity, but the most that we had accomplished, at least in my short, because we had all met, like, I had 6 weeks left back there. So we met up once, chatted a few times. We tried to get some sort of charter established. However, that didn't pan out, at least within that time frame. So
yeah, that's right. You guys have any experiences?
Yeah, I mean, when I was overseas in Iraq, you have a lot of time to talk and learn about your, people that you're serving with, right? And served with a couple of guys, Ron Grant and Frank Meals. They were both Prince Hall Masons, and they were very open with me about, I had lots of questions, because I'm always looking and searching and trying to learn, and I had tons of questions, and they were very open with me about the fraternity and why they're in it and what they've gotten out of it. And to this day I stay in touch with them, and I let them know that I became, I was raised, and they both said, "Welcome to the fraternity, brother," and that was a big deal to me. That was a huge deal to me. So yeah, I definitely had that happen.
That's good.
I actually had great regret because I was taking a break from the craft, and I kind of forgot what the signs were. And then I got stationed to England. I was in London for 3 years, and I was just, I guess I was timid. I was afraid to try to work my way into a lodge, and so I never visited a lodge in England in the 3 years I was there, and I really regret not doing that.
Yeah, that's a big opportunity there. We were there just 2 summers ago, just driving around and touring and stuff like that, so I didn't get the time to pop in, but that'd be awesome. It would really be an awesome opportunity to do that. So.
All right, lodge vacation next summer.
Yeah.
Although I don't recommend Kuwait in the summertime.
Not at all.
Yeah.
Never in my life.
Didn't think so. So also, there's a lot of things that we see. Brother Bryce sees a lot more of them than I see. Conversations on Reddit, dealing with, just different, I almost want to call them different kind of mindsets that we're coming across in Freemasonry. Hard to say if they're AF and AM, if they're F and AM, or if they're even like from real lodges or not. I mean, sometimes when you're reading some of the stuff, it's like you can't be from the same kind of structure as we are, in any kind of those different kind of aspects. And so another question, and we we're working towards it, but Brother Therian sort of jumped into it, and both Elwood and Therian were talking about that time away, and you were just mentioning you took time away, as I think we all do at certain times, depending upon how many years we've been in. So is there any particular thing you picked up from the time off, if that makes sense? Because you regret not going into the lodges there in England. But I'm pretty sure that your calendar was probably pretty full as it is, right, at that time.
Oh, yeah.
So when you decided to come back, what was the big decision to bring you back?
It was actually related to the reason I left.
Okay.
So, just joining the Air Force, I went to a school. It was, I had a cushy career. I listened to you guys talking about the hardships in Kuwait. I had such a cushy career. I had such a great time. But brand new in the Air Force, went to a school. It was 2 weeks of medical folks, and they taught you how to march and how to salute the collegiate officer. But one of the first guys I met, I noticed he had a ring, and he was a nurse coming in, and I hadn't talked to him for more than 5 minutes, but he was saying the most awful racist things I'd ever heard in my life. And it just turned me off. I was saying, do I even want to be associated with a guy who exhibits that kind of masonry? And, he proudly wore his ring, and I just really, at that moment, it just so turned me off that I didn't even make an effort. And it would have been a great effort because I was so busy doing other stuff. So it wasn't until years later, I was in a car at a meeting with a bunch of engineers, and there was a black fellow there, and I saw his ring, and I asked him. I just assumed he was Prince Hall, and I asked him about his masonry, and he was a Blue Lodge. And this is also about the time that Idaho had recognized Prince Hall lodges, and the state of Oregon took offense to that, and they had actually, there was a time when the state of Oregon removed their recognition of Idaho Grand Lodge. So you almost didn't know what your standing was. Mm-hmm. They eventually fixed that rift. But when I met that Black Mason, I found out he was a Blue Lodge, and I figured, okay, there's hope for Masonry. There's hope for the races. There's hope for Masonry. And if I don't stand up and become that kind of Mason that I want other Masons to see me as and to join the fraternity, then I'm abrogating my responsibility to be that Mason, and I'm giving it to that guy that I met when I first joined the Air Force. And I just decided I'm going to be more active. I'm going to be the Mason that I see, and that hopefully it would bring other Masons in.
And you haven't stopped yet.
Yeah, that's wild. I can't, that's hard to fathom, but being from California, and I feel like it's a bit more open growing up, and just I'm kind of speechless that will
Well, and that thing you were talking about, Brother Mark, that was just like 1990, 91-ish, right? Early 90s, when the recognition occurred.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, so still, I mean...
It took that long for that to happen.
Yeah, it took all that long for that to happen, but still, I mean, I think I've said this at least once on the podcast. I've told you all this at least once, too, though. I know I am so blown away by how forward-thinking Idaho Masonry is.
Yeah, I agree.
In our stances.
Yeah.
Because everybody thinks that we're just a totally backwards state. Whatever, but... As far as Masonry goes, when you look around and when you hear things like you heard, which is what we hear on Reddit and what we see, in these different kind of communities where people are just espousing whatever, and our books are wide open compared to a lot of them. I mean, even the bathroom restriction a couple of years ago before these guys were in, the one with one of the Carolinas, I can't remember right now, but having to deal with gender in bathrooms and stuff like that, where they were totally opposed, and Idaho was open. We've always felt like we're the leading edge, which is good because it allows us to learn from others and not be so insulated.
I mean, I remember talking with those Prince Hall brothers I was talking about, Ray Grant and Frank Meals, and I remember asking, well, could I join? And they said, well, you'd have to join a Blue Lodge. And I said, what's the difference? And then they kind of explained to me that, and the way it was kind of explained to me was, well, the Blue Lodge is for the white guys, and Prince Hall Lodge for the black guys, and that put me off for a long time. I mean, that was 15 years between the time I knew that and and joined this lodge here. And then I was one of the questions, if you remember, Brother Wayne, I asked you, like, how does that work with Prince Hall, and do we, work with them? And I love the fact that we do, and that was one of the reasons that I moved forward here.
Yeah.
I mean, truly, that really bothered me. That, well, why can't we be together?
Yeah, and that kind of came up in our discussion in that episode with brothers Elwood and Therian, and I'm baffled that it took so long for that kind of recognition to happen, and then even the fact that we did, like, that would cause a rift when Masonry is all about unity and bringing brotherhood to all, to all who asked for it. And if you've asked for it, then what are we doing denying that?
Right.
No matter where you're from or who you are,
Exactly.
But then to Brother Mark's story, like, if you're espousing, what that guy was saying, like, I understand, I wouldn't want to sit in lodge with him either, and I wouldn't want that to be the image of Masonry to anyone, outside of Masonry, because if they know I'm one, then they're gonna think I'm like him, and we're clearly not, so being that kind of example is what we should all try to be, right?
And that was part of my self-reflection when I came back, was that, what was I call that?
We'll find it.
We'll find it. In that, and I've said it many times, individual Masons have let me down. We tend to think, okay, we're going to be brothers, and I can trust a Mason to do this, and I know where their feelings are. No, individual Masons have let me down, but Masonry has never let me down. I've let myself down sometimes, but then when I reflect, I have a tendency to lose my temper a bit, and so that my favorite my favorite tool is the compasses, to circumscribe my desires and keep my passions within due bounds, and I sometimes get outside those due bounds, and the compasses bring me back. That's my favorite tool.
That's a good one we also spoke about before. So what are your brother's favorite tools? Put them on the spot.
I mean, for me, it's like, we say we meet on the level and we part on the square, right? And did I get that right? Just want to make sure. I'm newer here, right? But I just believe that I love the fact that we can come from all walks of life, and we can all come together on the level, and there's no hierarchy, there's no, we're all brothers here, we're all equals, because that's how I believe life should be. And so to me, that means a lot to me. But I also totally agree with you, Brother Mark. Like, I think about the compasses often, because I do have to control my own, my own temper myself. So I absolutely understand that too.
I would have to say, at this point in my life, the 24-inch gauge, right? Because there's only 24 hours in a day. We have to plan as best as we can, right? Because things happen, life happens. You can have a plan all the way up until time of execution. That's going to completely change, right? But you need to prescribe and schedule things and keep things in an organized manner that you can manage within that 24-inch gauge, within that 24-hour time frame. And that's super apparent to me now, especially because I have two kids coming back from my time in Kuwait, trying to get the house back to where we need it to be livable, trying to prepare everything so that my wife can handle the two kids while I go to work for 8 to 10 hours a day, leave for 2 weeks, right? Just making each one of those hours in the day count, and taking advantage of those as much as possible.
Kind of going back to like what you were talking about before, about you got to put in the work, right? Like that's where the common gavel comes in, because you got to cut some stuff out of your life and break some stuff off from your life to put in the work, too. So yeah.
The 24-inch gauge is really cool because it really only represents 24 hours of the day. And I've heard the lectures or the parts misquoted, as in you're going to have 8 hours for your work, 8 hours refreshment, and 8 hours. No, it doesn't say that.
Nope,
All it says is you've got 24 hours and you've got to figure out how to work them. Yeah.
So one thing too that is not really a tool, but like we have several men that are kind of used as examples of what Masons should be, right? And there's one specifically that I'm not going to mention, but we were told to try to imitate, right, in the 3rd degree lecture.
Mm-hmm.
But then there's also one that's mentioned a little bit, Pythagoras, right? And one thing that kind of Mark has alluded to here, just self-reflection, right? And one thing Pythagoras and his students did where they, at the end of each day, they reflected on the day, on what they could do better, what they could have done better, how did they react to certain things, what got under their skin, basically, and how can they correct that going forward. And I think Masonry, with all its tools, kind of gives us the ability to do that without even thinking we're really doing it. It just kind of calls how to better yourself in whatever way each day. And I think the more we reflect on that and how we react and do things in the world, the more or the less likely we are to be that brother that nobody wants to be the example of, right?
Yeah. General Dempsey made this speech, and he talked a lot about guys that had died in battle, right? And his big thing was make it matter, and that it's almost circumscribed on my heart that some of the brothers that I deployed with didn't come home, and guys that meant a lot to me in my life and were there for me when I needed people, to be there for me. And I think about them often. I reflect on that often, and I always think to myself, I want to make those guys proud because they didn't get a chance to live their whole life. And it's I want to make it matter, and I think Freemasonry allows me just another way to make it matter and to serve and to be part of the community and to serve my brothers.
Yeah. So kind of playing off that, right, after World War II, there was like an explosion in guys joining like motorcycle clubs, right? Because they wanted some brotherhood, some sort of fraternity. There's been conflicts of late, but it doesn't seem that there's been like an explosion of guys looking for fraternity or brotherhood. And Masonry is always open, but what are your guys' thoughts on maybe why Masonry isn't as big nowadays compared to after things like World War II or
Talking like overall or regarding like military service members?
Military service, I guess,
Either
but like
way.
overall, yeah.
Either.
I don't know, and this is just me like pontificating, right? Like, there's like the army itself is a fraternity, right? If you think about it, right? We have things that we have to memorize and say. We have certain clothes we have to wear. There's certain customs.
That's the Navy.
I think goats, right? So there's a bunch of that stuff, right? And so I think that built in can kind of play on both why people or why service members look for a fraternity, but it also, I feel like, could possibly lend into why service members don't look for a fraternity, right? They feel like they're already a part of something, right? If you ever met Roger Keels is my dad. He that is a big part of his life, is being a service member, right? That's all he'll ever talk to me about. He's really proud of his time in the Army, right? So, but that's his life, right? That he doesn't, outside of going to his religious services, right? That's what he'll talk to any service member. He has Air Force colonel friends that he'll talk to, right? So that's like his fraternity that he belongs to. That's his fellowship. That's his social life, whatever. And I feel, and that probably varies from person to person, right? Like when I get out, I don't envision myself wearing the Army hat, right? And going out and hanging out with my Army buddies. I'll hang out with friends, but not because they're in the Army. It's because they're my friends, or going to a lodge because I want to go there, not just because they're all service members, right? I think those two can play evenly in those two veins.
Well, there is that social aspect. In my parents' day, my grandparents' day, everybody belonged to something. You were a Mason, or you were an Odd Fellows, or you were a Modern Woodman, or you were something, and that was your social life. You didn't have television. I mean, radio was kind of a big thing, but it's not the same kind of thing as sitting in front of the television. And now we have streaming videos, and we've got computers, and we carry things around, and we get disconnected by being entertained all the time. Like I said, in my parents' day, Dad was in the Masons, and they were both an Eastern Star, and that was their social outlet. They went to Masons, and the women showed up, and they all had a potluck dinner. And then the men went upstairs and had their meetings, and the women stayed downstairs and did their cards. It was on Eastern Star night. There were a lot more Masons involved than there are now. Now they have a hard time getting an associate patron.
Which is?
That's the, you have to have at least a Mason in Eastern Star because it's a Masonic related fraternity. And so the associate patron sits in the East and helps the matron, the worthy matron. Well, it's worthy matron, worthy patron, and then the associates are in the West. But just an aside, in Pennsylvania, when I was in Pennsylvania, I was thinking about visiting Eastern Star, and then I found out that the Pennsylvania Masons don't recognize Eastern Star. They had to get their worthy patron from New Jersey to go to their Eastern Star meetings. And I thought that was weird. I didn't want to have anything to do with that either. So, there again, that's, I guess I took a tangent.
No, that's good because
from being the
we've
the social.
Yeah, we haven't
aspect.
had a chance yet to talk about things like Eastern Star. We've talked on some shrine stuff and Scottish Rite, and so that's why I asked that question, because especially for those listening who don't know, when we throw out terms that we're associated with, they're like, what?
Yeah.
So, no, that's completely fine.
You are familiar with the Job's Daughters, and
Right.
so you have to have a Mason there to hand the gavel over as part of the authority from the Masons.
Yeah.
Same thing in the Rainbow. So Eastern Star is the same.
I think part of it too is there's so much misinformation out there about Freemasonry right now. So if you're younger and you're searching and you're thinking about joining, I mean, my goodness, you could find so many crazy things out there that if you think, well, maybe there's a thread of truth in that, it'll make you not pursue it. And you have to be at least enough of a seeker to go, I don't know, let me find out more. Let me talk to somebody who's in it. Let me see if this is correct or not. There's so much garbage on TikTok and Instagram, and it's shocking, honestly.
You have to do a session on Leo Taxel sometime.
Oh yeah? How much time do we need for that one?
Look him up.
Okay. Now we also sort of hit on this exact thing in our last episode, and I was questioning if it was just a cop-out. There's too much distraction, and just sort of playing with numbers a little bit. Because in my estimation, there's more humans on the planet right now than there were after World War II. So that means a bigger pot of men to draw from.
Mm-hmm.
So, yes, there's a lot of distractions, but it's that you have to comb through it.
Mm-hmm.
You have to, if you find any value in it all, you have to start combing through it, and you have to take that step. You gotta go up to the door and see what it's really all about. To be doing that, because we can only communicate so much because there is so much other traffic out there.
Right.
No matter how much good or whatever indifferent we try to do, there's still, you don't even have to put in half of a keyword and you can start to get the most obscenely insane things that we all know sitting here are not a part of the gig.
Right.
So,
And it's hard for whatever you're looking for on the internet, it's hard to find what's true and what's not, because you're going to get like a million different results and not knowing anything. I feel like so many people, not that they're lazy, but they see so much traffic, right? That's kind of nonsense, but they don't want to keep searching because they're like, oh, well, everyone's saying this, so this must be true,
I just have to keep bouncing it off of, but these Masons I know, look at the fruit of their life and look at how they were and how they conducted themselves. It doesn't match up at all here, so something's off. And I think that's, you got to seek the truth though, and you have to keep seeking and searching. It's just like anything else in life.
And that's why I think, there's a ton of Masons out there, but one thing that like the Scottish Rite keeps saying at our meetings is be proud to be a Mason. We're not supposed to ask people, or we're not supposed to take credit when we do certain charitable things, but also be proud to be a Mason so that people know hey, that guy's a Mason, he's not that bad of a guy, he's got to be doing something right.
Well, just, what our whole thing is just about, what would we say to somebody who's on the fence about joining? What are the best keys? And also sometimes people have books, recommendations for people to read, but what are some of the main things that you would say if, somebody was talking with you and they just were sort of hemming and hawing back and forth? What would you say to them as sort of that thing to maybe give them a little bit of comfort, whatever they choose? I'm not talking about what are we going to say to persuade them, because I'm not a big guy in numbers. I'm not a numbers guy. I want quality. I don't want a bunch of numbers. So just that aspect, what would you say? What kind of advice would you offer out to somebody seeking in general? Because we're reaching across the globe, so this is just sort of different perspectives on that kind of a.
Well, somebody actually did that and came to me for advice and said they were on the fence. I'd try to find out why are you questioning? What is your trepidation? And then try to pursue that. If it's a matter of I see so much stuff on the internet, I'd say first, okay, go to reputable sources that are, actual Grand Lodges, the information from Grand Lodges. What do they say? And take with a grain of salt anything that you see opposed to that. Sometimes it comes from disgruntled Masons' experiences, and they might have a point. That's not the total of Masonry. So I would say go to a reputable source and make sure that it's reputable.
Brother Nick, Brother Don?
I would say, people hear about Freemasonry all the time, right? When I was in California, Masons had a booth out at a farmer's market. If you've seen National Treasure, they talk at least some appendant bodies of Freemasonry, right? So you hear about it all the time. What I would say is kind of leaning off what Brother Mark said is to honestly, with intent, look for information and make sure it jives with your life, right? A part of becoming a Freemason is you checking it out, but they're also assessing you, right? The organization wants to make sure they fit for you like you fit for them, right? Especially on the spousal level too, right? That's why they want to include your spouse in on it as well. You just got to look at reputable sources, learn what you can, talk to representatives from your local lodge. If you know somebody that's a Freemason, talk to them. Get some information from them. If they don't have the information, maybe they can talk to another brother. One time, I was at Fort Gordon, Georgia, now Fort Eisenhower. I had my monitor on my desk right next to my laptop as I was studying for one of the courses I was taking. And somebody had stopped by and he noticed my book. It had the square and compass on it, right? Everybody's familiar with Freemasonry. He's like, "Are you a Mason?" I said, "Yes." He's like, "Hey, can I talk about it sometime?" You have to, I think, from the Mason's perspective, you have to be willing to talk about it and at least speak about it intelligently. From the inquisitor or the inquirer, some earnest, intentful searching, both internally and externally, of what you really want, and then just go for it, right? You're not going to know everything until you go for it, right? And if you find out that Freemasonry is not for you, then there's nothing that's keeping you here against any obligation that you have, right? So,
and I'd say come check it out. That's what I did. I'd say get together with some of the brothers from your local lodge, go to the pre-stated meeting dinner, go to some of the fellowships. That's what I did as well, and really just have an open heart, but more than anything, ask a lot of questions. Why are they Masons? Why do they stay in it? Why do they stay involved? What do they get out of it? And then I guess really just check that against your heart and say, if I fit into this, then seek more and pursue it. And if something doesn't jive there with you and you're like, I don't like these guys, well, then maybe it's not for you. But for me, I respected the way we could go out to a bar and have a drink or two. No one's getting totally drunk and acting like idiots, and everyone comports themselves like what I believe to be a real man. And that was a big thing for me to go, I want to be part of this, because I see these other guys and there's something about them that I respect and want to emulate.
Something I'd like to bring up too, though. So when I was initially I was asking, I noticed a guy, he had a tattoo that was affiliated with Freemasonry. I asked him a question. He passed me off to one of his friends. He showed me around a lodge down in downtown Boise, and while I was there, at least 3 of the Masons there had said, "This is the best decision I ever made." Right, and that made me curious. Like, what does that mean? Why? Right? Want to see that out for myself, right? I think that means something. If there's so much value in somebody's life that is like outside of marriage or having kids, right? If Freemasonry was the best decision that you've made out of your life, I think that's something to aspire to, at least check out and entertain the thought of. Get to know some guys, see what you can learn.
And I think also too, Brother Mark, with your bedrock foundation, family-wise, and with the lodge and the connection of the church next door to us and all that kind of stuff too, I have to sort of think that there's maybe a little gleam in your eye at times, because when you hear stuff like this, that you know that we're still doing good.
Yeah.
At least here we're doing good. We're doing our best. I mean, we're hearing stuff, and what you experienced, others don't. There are lodges that don't call people back. Unfortunately, that's what's happening.
That's a huge deal. I mean, I think I just asked one person, and then they connected me with a Master Mason, and then within a day we had a time to come sit down and talk about it with you, Brother Wayne. So that's a huge deal.
So as we get close to our time here, sort of try to wrap this back together, one of the things also that I'm looking forward to as we put this down a couple episodes back was that our connection as Masons in Meridian, looking towards the future. So if we just took our lodge in its current state, what would any of you want to forecast on the strength of Freemasonry, its future in this area, its place as a landmark space within town? Is there anything that you would want to, the 3 of you want to venture a guess? I mean, of course, Brother Mark has seen foundations all the way up, so I'm sure he's got something to say on that too. But is there anything that you foresee that we're going to be able to, continue this deal for quite some time here?
I mean, I see a lot of the guys that are joining now are really, really wanting to be involved and really wanting to participate in everything that we do. And that goes from, obviously from, attending stated meetings and doing those things, but also being involved in all the work that we're doing in the community and showing up for events and showing who we are to this community, rather than just that secret building that what goes on in there. I don't know what that is, but now we're getting out there and showing this is who we are. And I would forecast, basically using your word, that to see more involvement with that and see us out more in the community, and that I think people are going to start to recognize, wow, the Masons are doing a lot of good stuff in Meridian. That's something interesting. We should look into that more. That's what I would say.
I would think too. So when I first became an entered apprentice, right, I felt like there was a wide gap between my age group and the general age group of the lodge itself, right? So, and we were in completely separate walks of life. I was just out, I got my first job, bought a house. Everybody else had been seasoned and done a lot more with their lives, right? And so, but the longer I've been in Meridian 47, I've seen a lot of people within the same my age group, right, that I could socialize with and connect with, right? And I think having people spread across like walks of life, times of life, whatever, I think that offers more connection to people who may not know much, or would afford opportunities to socialize and get more correct information about the craft, about Freemasonry generally.
Good, Mark.
Well, I think one of the best investments we've made in recent years, and we've put a lot into that building, but one of the best investments we've made was joining the Chamber of Commerce. I've really enjoyed going to the Chamber of Commerce meetings and just being there, and people they'll say, what is Masonry?
Right.
I've heard of Masonry, or my grandfather was a Mason, but I really don't know anything about it. And I've after the meetings, I've taken people into the building and shown them, and that relationship it's borne fruit with rents, and it's borne fruit with just being in the community. It's like opening up this red box in the middle of town. Actually has people in it that are involved.
It's like we got to let our light shine a little bit.
Yes, absolutely. And it's gonna, we don't recruit, we don't ask people to join, but this is as close as we get to recruiting, of just being seen.
Yeah, and Brother Nick hit on it too, real quick too, is like I stress with a lot of the guys, like when we have the Oktoberfest coming up here, 11, 12,000 people, whatever, 12-hour day, all these different things we're going to be doing, cooking, serving, 50-50s, whatever. You have to have an elevator pitch ready, because somebody's going to ask you, what are Masons? What do you do? There you go. And that's, we don't recruit, but you got to have it. You got to have that lined in, and this is what I'm going to say. I can tell you what it is in 45 seconds or less. Boom, here's what it is, and give them that, to then allow them, if they want to ask a question or anything like that. But if you've been in, you've done all 3 degrees, you should be able to pitch what we are, pretty easily in that kind of aspect. So
yeah, and Nick's got a little patch on his vest right there that says "To be one, ask one," right? Because we're not going to ask you; you got to ask us. And especially if you're a Master Mason, you got to be ready to, answer that question to the best of your ability. And if you can't answer it fully, then at least know where to go. That's the whole point of this.
anybody's questions, right?
Yeah, at least be able to speak to what it's done in your life. What you putting in the work into the craft, the difference that's made in your life.
Yeah.
We should all be able to share that.
Yeah. Brother Bryce, anything else you want to squeeze in here?
I've already made the obligatory goat joke episode, so
we're checking the boxes as we go.
But no, I just want to thank you guys for coming out. Thank you, brother, for sharing your stories.
Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, it was a good time.
Yeah, glad to be here.
We like to get all the different perspectives and see those connections. And I think having Therian and Elwood a couple weeks back, and now you brothers now, it gives that fuller picture of service and times and back and forth and how that can lay into what you're doing and how you could possibly use those tools moving forward in Masonry, if that's going to be your thing, if you're going from service over there. So Brother Bryce, I don't know if you noticed, but I was throwing a bunch of different images. One of them was when you were in the cage. I think Brother Nick saw you up there on the big screen on the cage. But to make it easier for people now to understand exactly where they can find us, you don't even need a cheat sheet.
No.
Unless I missed anything. So where would somebody go if they were seeking some information from us wells of knowledge that we are?
So Reddit and Twitter is probably the best place to go. We're at Templar on the Run on both of those. Instagram, if you want to see, kind of what we do in our lodge, that'll be at Temp on the Run. And then we're on TikTok too, at Templar on the Run. If you've got questions specifically and don't use any of those social medias, you can email us at templarontheRun@gmail.com. Of course, now we're on Google Podcasts as well as Spotify. So, any of those platforms, just if you search Templar on the Run, we should be pretty easy to find. It's not a very common name.
Hopefully they can find us. Yeah. Once again, brothers, thanks for coming down and giving some more light to what we're trying to do here and expose people to some truths behind Freemasonry, the craft, and all that we do here. So thank you again for your time.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thanks, brothers, and thanks everyone for listening. Hope you have a great rest of your day.